Hey guys, welcome back to another live. It is your girl Andrew the Angel, back at it with another video. All right, I was just looking at my channel, and I was really going live every single day, guys. A couple months ago. So I'm gonna try to be a little bit more frequent with the reading videos because I know that a lot of you guys do appreciate the reading, and maybe you listen to it as a podcast, whether or not you are following along. But thank you guys so much for tuning in to another Hot Girl Reads 48 Laws of Power by Mr. Robert Greene. Guys, we are more than halfway done with this series. Dang, life is crazy. Time just keeps on moving. All right, guys. So I'm not going to keep wasting any more time. Let's just get into it. Please open up your books to page 200. 200 out of, holy cow. Okay, wait. Hold on. Out of 430. So, okay, guys, I'm just gonna get in. Okay, guys, so I'm just gonna go ahead and get into it. So, Law 26, keep your hands clean. Judgment. You must seem a paragon of civility and efficiency. Your hands are never soiled by mistakes and nasty deeds. Maintain such a spotless appearance by using others as scapegoats and cat's paws to disguise your involvement. Interesting, very interesting. Let me see how long this one is before we get into it. Okay. Part 1. Conceal your mistakes. Have a scapegoat around to take the blame. Our good name and reputation depend more on what we conceal than on what we reveal. Everyone makes mistakes, but those who are truly clever manage to hide them and to make sure someone else is blamed. A convenient scapegoat should always be kept around for such moments. Interesting. Now, observance of the law. Oh my god. Wow. Trying to show off for the camera, guys. Okay, observance of the law number 1. Near the end of the 2nd century AD, as China's mighty Han's Empire slowly collapsed, the great general and imperial minister Xiao emerged as the most powerful man in the country, seeking to extend his power base and rid himself of the last of his rivals. Cao Cao began a campaign to take control of the strategically vital Central Plain. During the siege of the city, he slightly miscalculated the timing for supplies of grain to arrive from the capital. As he waited for the shipment to come in, the army ran low on food, and Cao Cao was forced to order the chief of the commissariat to reduce its rations. Cao Cao kept a tight rein on the army and ran a network of informers. His spies soon reported that the men were complaining, grumbling that he was living well while they themselves had barely enough to eat. Perhaps Cao Cao was keeping the food for himself, they murmured. If grumbling spread, Cao Cao could have a mutiny on his hands. He summoned the chief of the commissariat to his tent. I want to ask you to lend me something, and you must not refuse, Cao Cao told the chief. What is it? The chief replied. I want the loan of your head to show the troops, said Cao Cao. But I've done nothing wrong, cried the chief. I know, said Cao Cao with a sigh. But if I do not put you to death, there will be a mutiny. Do not grieve. After you're gone, I'll look after your family. Put this way, the request left the chief no choice. So he resigned himself to his fate and was beheaded that very day. Seeing his head on a public display, the soldiers stopped grumbling. Some saw through Cao Cao's gesture but kept quiet, stunned and intimidated by his violence. And most accepted his version of who was to blame, preferring to believe in his wisdom and fairness than in his incompetence and cruelty. Very interesting. What do you guys think? Tell me your thoughts. Tell me your thoughts. Let's go ahead and get into the interpretation of what the freak I just read to you. Cao Cao came to the power in an extremely tumultuous time. In the struggle for supremacy in the crumbling Han Empire, enemies had emerged from all sides. The battle for the Central Plain had proven more difficult than he imagined, and money and provisions were a constant concern. No wonder that under such stress he had forgotten to order supplies in time. Once it became clear that the delay was a critical mistake and that the army was seething with mutiny, Cao Cao had two options: apology and excuses, or a scapegoat. Understanding the workings of power and importance of appearance as he did, Cao Cao did not hesitate for one moment. He shopped around for the most convenient head and had it served immediately. Dun dun dun. Occasionally, mistakes are inevitable. The world is just too unpredictable. People of power, however, are undone, not by the mistakes they make, but by the way they deal with them. Excuses and apologies are much too blunt tools for this delicate operation. The powerful avoid them. By apologizing, you open up all sorts of doubts about your competence, your intentions, and any other mistakes you make may not have confessed. Excuses satisfy no one, and apologies make everyone uncomfortable. The mistake does not vanish with an apology. True. It deepens and festers. Better to cut it off instantly, distract any attention from yourself, and focus attention on the convenient scapegoat before people have time to ponder your responsibility or your possible incompetence. I would rather betray the whole world than let the world betray me. General Cao Cao, C. AD 155 to 200. Okay, guys. Let's go ahead and read the Little Red Fable, story, or whatever poem. All right. Shelm Justice. A great calamity befell the town of Shelm one day. The town cobbler murdered one of his customers. So he was brought before the judge, who sentenced him to die by hanging. When the verdict was read, a townsman arose and cried out, "If your honor pleases, you have sentenced to death the town cobbler. He's the only one we've got. If you hang him, who will mend our shoes?" Who, cried all of the people of Shalom. With one voice, the judge nodded in agreement and reconsidered his verdict. "Good people of Shalom," he said, "what you say is true. Since we have only one cobbler, it would be a great wrong against the community to let him die. As there are two roofers in town, let one of them be hanged instead." Oh my God. A treasury of Jewish folklore, Nathan Oswald, ED, 1948. Wow, I was not prepared for that ending. Anybody else? Thoughts? Let me drink some water. Wonderful. All right. Now, let's go ahead and get into the observance of the law number 2. Oh, wow. This chapter was way longer than I thought. Okay. For several years, Cesare Borgia campaigned to gain control of large parts of Italy in the name of his father, Pope Alexander. In the year 1500, he managed to take Romagna in northern Italy. The region had for years been ruled by a series of greedy masters who had plundered its wealth for themselves. Without police or any disciplining force, it had descended into lawlessness, whole areas being ruled by robbers and feuding families. To establish order, Cesar appointed a lieutenant general of the region, Orco, Ramiro de Orco, a cruel and vigorous man. According to Niccolo Machiavelli, Cesar gave de Orco all absolute powers. Wow, guys. With energy and violence, the Orco established a severe, brutal justice in Romagna and soon rid of all of its lawless elements. But in his zeal, he sometimes went too far. And after a couple years of local population resented and even hated him. In December of 1502, Cesar took decisive action. He first let it be known that he had not approved of de Orco's cruel and violent deeds, which stemmed from the lieutenant's brutal nature. Then, on December 22nd, he imprisoned de Orco in the town of Cesena, and the day after Christmas, the townspeople awoke to find a strange spectacle in the middle of the piazza. De Orco's headless body, dressed in a lavish suit with the purple cape, the head impaled beside it on a pike, the bloody knife and the executioner's block laid out beside the head. As Machiavelli continued his comments on the affair, the ferocity of the scene left the people at once stunned and satisfied. OMFing G. That was crazy. I was not even literally prepared for that ending again. What? So let's go ahead and get into the interpretation of what I just read to you guys. Cesar Borgia was a master player in the game of power, always planning several moves ahead. He set his opponents for the cleverest traps. For this, Machiavelli honored him above all the others in The Prince. I know, right? Hi, Ghost Dog. That sounds really intense. Can you imagine living in that time period? Like, oh my God. Cesar foresaw the future with amazing clarity in Romagna. Only brutal justice would bring order to the region. The process would take several years, and at first the people would welcome it. Also, hi, Ghost Dog. Welcome to the live. But it would soon make many enemies, and the citizens would come to resent the imposition of such unforgiving justice, especially by outsiders. I would love to go back for just one day, but no longer than that. Oh, you got it. I would see a video. If you could record a video for me, please. I don't want to go back to that time. It seems really insane. Like, what? Did you just hear the last story I read? The guy murdered someone and was able to get away from it, and an innocent guy got hung just because he had the same job as someone else. It seems a little bit too intense for me. I don't know. But, okay. Cesar himself then could not be seen as an agent of justice. The people's hatred, too many problems in the future, and so a man who could do the dirty work, knowing in advance that once the task was done, he would have to display de Orco's head on a pike. The scapegoat in this case had been planned from the beginning. With Sao, the scapegoat was an entirely innocent man. In the Romagna, he was the offensive weapon in Cesar's arsenal that let him get the dirty work done without bloodying his own hands. With this second kind of scapegoat, it is wise to separate yourself from the hatchet man at some point, either leaving him dangling in the wind or, like Cesar, even making yourself the one to bring him to justice. Not only are you free of involvement in the problem, you can appear as the one who cleaned it up. The Athenians regularly maintained a number of degraded and useless beings at the public's expense. And when any calamity, such as plague, drought, or famine befell the city, these scapegoats were led about and then sacrificed, apparently by being stoned outside the city. The Golden Bow, Sir James George Fraser, 1854 to 1941. That sounds like, you know, that meme on the internet when like something goes wrong and then everybody blames Queen Naija? That kind of sounds like that because she is a scapegoat. Like something will happen. Like I think she was getting blamed for the eclipse. Yeah, everything is Queen Naija's fault. It's so crazy. Poor girl. Poor girl. Anyways, keys to power. Okay. Keys to power. The use of scapegoats is as old as civilization itself, and the examples of it can be found in cultures around the world. The main idea behind these sacrifices is the shifting of guilt and sin to the outside figure, object, animal, or man, which is then banished or destroyed. The Hebrews used to take a live goat, hence the term scapegoat, upon whose head the priest would lay both hands while confessing the sins of the children of Israel, having thus had those sins transferred to it. The beast would be led away and abandoned in the wilderness. That is insane. Getting blamed for the eclipse as well. I know, right? Like, that girl, I don't even know how that joke started, but literally from the beginning, like people just always be blaming Queen Naija for everything. You've seen it? With the Athenians and the Aztecs, the scapegoat was human, often a person fed and raised for the purpose. Since famine and plague were thought to be visited on humans by gods and punishment for wrongdoing, the people suffered not only from the famine and plague themselves, but from the blame and guilt. They freed themselves of guilt by transferring it to an innocent person whose death was intended to satisfy the divine powers and banish the evil from their midst. And you're talking about you want to go back to that time. Imagine being the person that gets blamed for a famine, and you're literally the person that they have to go ahead and sacrifice to the gods for their hunger to be quenched. Like, it just seems a little bit too intense. I don't know. Anybody else? Anybody else? It is an extremely human response to not look inward after a mistake or crime, but rather to look outward and affix blame and guilt on the convenient object. When a plague was ravaging Thebes, Oedipus looked everywhere for its cause, everywhere except inside himself and his own sin of incest, which had so offended the gods and occasioned the plague. This profound needed to exteriorize one's guilt. To project it on another person or object has immense power, which the clever knows how to harness. That's so crazy. Yeah, right. And then people, like, how do you feel about, like, do you think you would be able to live in a post-apocalyptic world? This is like one of the questions that I always ask people, like one of the first times that I meet them, so I can kind of like gauge what type of person they are, because I know my response. But a post-apocalyptic world kind of reminds me a lot of like a world of what it used to be like. You know what I'm trying to say? Like very cutthroat, war-driven, swords, fighting, politics are insane, like warlords, kingdoms. That's how I'm really thinking the post-apocalyptic world is going to be like. Yeah, it would be brutal. I think I could survive, but I don't know if I would really want to, because it's just like we've gotten so far in peace in society. Like going to the doctor is such a convenience. What are we gonna do? Like, does cancer still exist in a post-apocalyptic world? If it does, how are you supposed to treat it? These are the questions that keep me up at night. Okay, let me get back to what we're all here for, me reading to you. Okay, Sacrifice is a ritual, perhaps the most ancient ritual of all. Ritual to all wellspring of power. In the killing of the Orco, note Caesar's symbolic and ritualistic display of his body. By framing it in this dramatic way, he focused guilt outward. The citizens of Romagna responded instantly because it comes so naturally to us to look outward rather than inward. We readily accept the scapegoat's guilt. The bloody sacrifice of the scapegoat seems a barbaric relic of the past, but the the practice lives on to this day, if indirectly and symbolically. Since power depends on appearances, and those in power must never seem to make mistakes, the use of scapegoats is as popular as ever. What modern leader will take responsibility for his blunders? He searches out others to blame, a scapegoat to sacrifice. When Mao Zedong's cultural revolution failed miserably, he made no apologies or excuses to the Chinese people. Instead, like Cao Cao before him, he offered up scapegoats, including his own personal secretary and a high-ranking member of the party, Xian Pota. Guys, this literally reminds me of a story. Quick story time. So one of my previous jobs, I'm not gonna say which job, and I'm not gonna say when it was, but one of my previous jobs, my boss, like, we would have this thing called a pre-shift before we would actually have our shift. And my boss, he would go off on us. He would literally go off on us. He's like, you guys are doing this wrong, this wrong, this wrong. We need to hit these things, and we need to get these scores, and we need to be looking like this. It was super crazy, super intense. But one time, everybody was getting cussed out at pre-shift because someone was exchanging, so we would have to make coffee at this job, and someone was changing the sugar that people put in the coffee, and instead of putting it as sugar, they put it as salt, and they were putting the salt in the coffee, and people didn't know that it was salt instead of sugar, so we all got in trouble because one person was doing that. Come to find out, it was a manager, and they were blaming us, and they were trying to put it on the workers, like the lower people, that we were putting salt into the thing instead of sugar. And yeah, he never apologized to any of the workers. The manager just got quietly fired, and it was just like never talked about again. That's how people use scapegoats. And that's how, like, these people of power, for him to like get mad at us, he never apologized, he never said nothing like that. But it was like he needed to use a scapegoat in order to justify his actions and talking to us and all of that stuff. Let me know your own personal stories with like people of power using scapegoats right in front of your eyes, because it happens so often. But anyways, I digress. A member of the party Xian Pota. Franklin D. Roosevelt had a reputation for honesty and fairness. Throughout his career, however, he faced many situations in which being the nice guy would have spelled political disaster. Yet he could not be seen as an agent of any foul play. For 20 years, then, his secretary, Louis Howe, played the role of the Orca had. He had handled the backroom deals, the manipulation of the press, and the underhanded campaign maneuvers. And whenever a mistake was committed or a dirty trick contradicting Roosevelt's carefully crafted image became public, Howe served as the scapegoat and never complained. Interesting. Besides conveniently shifting blame, a scapegoat can serve as a warning to others. In 1631, a plot was hatched to oust France Cardinal Richelieu from power, a plot that became known as the Day of Dupes. It almost succeeded, since it involved an upper echelon of government, including the Queen Mother, but through luck and his own connivances, Richelieu survived. Interesting. One of the key conspirators was a man named Marillac, the keeper of the seals. Richelieu could not imprison him without implicating the Queen Mother, an extremely dangerous tactic. So he targeted Marillac's brother, a marshal in the army. This man had no involvement in the plot. Richelieu, however, afraid that the other conspirators might be in the air, especially in the army, decided to set an example. He tried the brother on trumped up charges and had him executed. Oh my God. In this way, he indirectly punished the real perpetrator who had thought himself protected and warned any future conspirators that he would not shrink from sacrificing the innocent to protect from his own power. Wow. In fact, it is so often wise to choose the most innocent victim possible as a sacrificial goat. Such people will not be powerful enough to fight you, and their naive protest may be seen as protesting too much, may be seen, in other words, as a sign of their guilt. Be careful, however, not to create a martyr. It is important that you remain the victim, the poor leader betrayed by the incompetence of those around you. If the scapegoat appears too weak and his punishment too cruel, you may end up the victim of your own device. Sometimes you should find a more powerful scapegoat, one who will elicit less sympathy in the long run. Oh my God, this is so cutthroat. Interesting. In this vein, history has time and again shown the value of using a close associate as a scapegoat. This is known as the fall of the favorite. Most kings had a personal favorite at the court, a man whom they singled out, but this court favorite could serve as a convenient scapegoat in the case of the threat of the king's reputation. The public would readily believe in the scapegoat's guilt. Why would the king sacrifice his favorite unless he were guilty? And the other courtiers, resentful of the favorite anyway, would rejoice at his downfall. The king, meanwhile, would rid himself of a man who, by the time, had probably learned too much about him, perhaps becoming arrogant and even disdainful of him. Choosing a close associate as a scapegoat has the same value of the fall of the favorite. You may lose a friend or aid, but in the long-term scheme of things, it is important to hide your mistakes than to hold on to someone who one day will probably turn against you. Besides, you can always find a new favorite to take his place. That is so... That is... It's not always the best to be the favorite. We all know that. Let's just say that. We all know that. Being the favorite puts a target on your back. It really does. Also, like the video if you're liking Hot Girl Reads. Okay. Now, guys, imagine this. Close your eyes unless you're driving or handling heavy machinery. Imagine this, guys, okay? The innocent goat. On the Day of Atonement, the high priest brings the goat into the temple, places his hands on his head, and confesses the people's sins, transferring guilt to the guiltless beast, which is then led to the wilderness and abandoned, the people's sins and blame vanishing with him. Authority. Folly consists not in committing folly, but in being incapable of concealing it. All men make mistakes, but the wise conceal the blunders they have made. Which fools make them public. Reputation depends more on what is hidden than on what is seen. If you can't be good, be careful. By Mr. Baltasar Gracian himself, 1601 to 1658. Now, this is part 2 of the same law, okay? Make use of the cat's paw. What does that mean? In the fable, the monkey sorry. In the fable, the monkey grabs the paw of his friend, the cat, and uses it to fish chestnuts out of the fire, thus getting the nuts he craves without hurting himself. If there is something unpleasant or unpopular that needs to be done, it is far too risky for you to do the work yourself. You need a cat's paw, someone who does the dirty work. Someone who does the dirty, dangerous work for you. The cat's paw grabs what you needs, hurts whom you need to hurt, and keeps people from noticing that you are the one responsible. Let someone else be the executioner or the bearer of bad news, while you bring only joy and glad tidings. Interesting. Okay. All right. Now here, what's the convo? We are talking about scapegoats, and right now we are talking about how you should get someone else to do the dirty and dangerous work for you. So let's go ahead and get a little bit more into the conversation and see what the author, Mr. Robert Greene, has to say about this topic, okay? So, observance of the law number 1. In 59 BC, the future queen Cleopatra of Egypt, that then 10 years old, witnessed the overthrow and banishment of her father, Ptolemy the 12th, at the hand of his elder daughters, her own sisters. One of the daughters, Berenice, emerged as the leader of the rebellion, and to ensure that she would now rule Egypt alone, she imprisoned her other sisters and murdered her own husband. This may have been necessary as a practical step to secure her rule, but that a member of the royal family, a queen no less, would so overtly exact such violence on her own family horrified her subjects and stirred up powerful opposition. 4 years later, this opposition was able to return Ptolemy to power, and he promptly led Berenice and the other elder sisters beheaded. In 51 BC, Ptolemy died, leaving 4 remaining children as heirs. As was the tradition in Egypt, the eldest son, Ptolemy the 13th, only 10 at the time, married the elder sister, Cleopatra, now 18. Which book? This is The 48 Laws of Power by Mr. Robert Greene. And the couple took the throne together as king and queen. None of the 4 children felt satisfied with this. Everyone, including Cleopatra, wanted more power. A struggle emerged between Cleopatra and Ptolemy, each trying to push the other to this side. In 48 BC, with the help of the government faction that feared Cleopatra's ambitions, Ptolemy was able to force his sister to flee the country, leaving himself as the sole ruler. In exile, Cleopatra schemed. She wanted to rule alone and to restore Egypt to its past glory, a goal she felt none of her other siblings could achieve. Yet as long as they were alive, she could not realize her dream. And the example of Berenice had made it clear that no one would serve a queen who was seen murdering her own kind. Even Ptolemy the 13th had not dared murder Cleopatra, although he knew she would plot against him from abroad. Within a year, after Cleopatra's banishment, the Roman dictator Julius Caesar arrived in Egypt. Determined to make a country a Roman colony, Cleopatra saw her chance. Re-entering Egypt in disguise, she traveled hundreds of miles to reach Caesar in Alexandria. Legend has it that she herself smuggled into his presence, rolled up inside of a carpet, which was gracefully unfurled at his feet, revealing the young queen. Cleopatra immediately went to work on the Roman. She appealed to his love of spectacle and his interest in Egyptian history and poured on her feminine charms. Caesar soon succumbed and restored Cleopatra to the throne. Cleopatra's siblings seethed. She had outmaneuvered them. Ptolemy the 13th would not wait to see what happened next. From his palace in Alexandria, he summoned a great army to march on the city and attack Caesar. In response, Caesar immediately put Ptolemy and the rest of the family under house arrest. But Cleopatra's younger sister, Arsinoe, escaped from the palace and placed herself at the head of the approaching Egyptian troops, proclaiming herself as the Queen of Egypt. Now Cleopatra finally saw her chance. She convinced Caesar to release Ptolemy from house arrest, under the agreement that he would broker a truce. Of course, she knew he would do the opposite, that he would fight Arsinoe for control of the Egyptian army. But this was Cleopatra's benefit, for it would divide the royal family. Better still, it would give Caesar the chance to defeat and kill her siblings in battle. Reinforced by troops from Rome, Caesar swiftly defeated the rebels. In the Egyptian retreat, Ptolemy drowned in the Nile. Caesar captured Arsinoe and had her sent to Rome as a prisoner. He also executed the numerous enemies who had conspired against Cleopatra and imprisoned others who had opposed her. To reinforce her position as uncontested queen, Cleopatra now married the only sibling left, Ptolemy the 14th, only 11 at the time. Wow. And the weakest of the lot. 4 years later, Ptolemy mysteriously died of poison. In 41 BC, Cleopatra employed on the second Roman leader, Mark Antony, the same tactics she had used so well on Julius Caesar. After seducing him, she hinted to him that her sister Arsinoe, still a prisoner in Rome, had conspired to destroy him. Mark Antony believed her and promptly had Arsinoe executed, thereby getting rid of the last sibling who posed such a threat to Cleopatra. Did you guys know that about Cleopatra and her family? How basically she was literally the only one to survive. That is so crazy, guys. That is really crazy. Now, let's go ahead and interpret what the freak I just read to you guys. And let me know your thoughts in the chat, okay? Legend has it that Cleopatra succeeded through her seductive charms. But in her reality, her power came from an ability to get people to do her bidding without realizing that they were being manipulated. Caesar and Antony not only rid of her most dangerous sibling, Ptolemy the 13th and Arsinoe, they decimated all of her enemies. In both the government and in the military, the two men became her cat's paws. They entered the fire for her, did the ugly but necessary work while shielding her from appearing as the destroyer of her siblings. Uh-oh, no ma'am, was not aware that it was... I know, right? I know. Like, gosh, to be a royal, you really gotta be concerned. One, you gotta marry your sibling, then you gotta kill him. Like, hey, what's going on? What's going on behind these closed doors, guys? But yeah, where was I at? Shielding her from appearing as the destroyer of her siblings and fellow Egyptians. And in the end, both men acquiesced to her desire to rule Egypt not as a Roman colony, but as an independent allied kingdom. And they did all of this for her without realizing how she had manipulated them. This was persuasion of the subtlest and most powerful kind. A queen must never dirty her hands with ugly tasks, nor can a king appear in public with blood on his face. Yet power cannot survive without the constant squashing of enemies. There will always be dirty little tasks that have to be done to keep you on the throne. Like Cleopatra, you need a cat's paw. Like, guys, this is how, for example, if the president were to declare war, it's not the president that's out there fighting, guys. Who's out there killing people? It's not the president. It's the people in the military. So that's just like how the president uses the cat's paw, and it's just like really using people for your own advantage, really. This will be usually a person from outside your immediate circle who will therefore be unlikely to realize how he or she is being used. You will find these dupes everywhere. People who enjoy doing you favors, especially if you throw them a minimal bone or two in exchange. But as they accomplish tasks, they may seem to that may seem to them innocent enough, or at least completely justified. They are actually clearing the field for you, spreading the information you feed them, undermining the people they do not realize are your rivals, inadvertently furthering your cause, dirtying their hands while yours remain spotless. Literally, the analogy of the military is spot on for this. So I'm gonna go ahead and read you guys a little bit of these read little fables and stories, quotes, poems, all of that. So this is the first one. The Monkey and the Cat. A monkey and a cat in roguery and fun, sworn brothers twain, both owned a common master, which mischief in the house was done, by Pug and Tom was contrived each disaster. One winter's day was seen this hopeful pair, close to the kitchen fire as usual posted. Amongst the red-hot coals the cook with care had placed some nice plump chestnuts to be roasted, from whence in smoke a pungent odor rose, whose oily fragrance struck the monkey's nose. Tom, says sly Pug, pray could not you and I share this dessert, and the cook to please to cater? Had I such claws as yours, I'd quickly try. Lend me a hand, 'twill be a coup de maître. So said he seized his colleague's ready paw, pulled out the fruit, and crammed it in his jaw. Now came the shining mistress of the fane, and oft in haste the two moderers scampered. Tom for the share of the plunder had the pain, whilst Pug his palate with the daintiest pampered. Fables, Jean de La Fontaine, 1621 to 1695. Did anybody understand what the freak I just read right there? Because I was confused. But sometimes, like with poems, I really have to like sit there and read it many times in silence to really digest what the freak I read. But long story short, what I'm getting is that there's like a monkey and a cat, and one of them had to go do something, and then the other one got to eat. Anybody else? You kind of get it, Mr. Russ? I don't know. I'm just confused as you are. All right, let's get into the next one. Okay. The Crow Hen, the Cobra, and the Jackal. Once upon a time, there was a crow and his wife who had built a nest in the banyan tree. A big snake crawled into the hollow trunk and ate up the chicks as they were hatched. The crow did not want to move since he loved the tree so dearly, so he went to his friend the jackal for advice. A plan of action was devised. The crow and his wife flew about in implementation. As the wife approached the pond, she saw the woman of the king's court bathing, with pearls, necklaces, gems, garments, and a golden chain lying on the shore. The crow hen seized the golden chain in her beak and flew towards the banyan tree, with the eunuchs in pursuit. When she reached the tree, she dropped the chain into the hole. As the king's men climbed the tree for the chain, they saw the swelling hood of the cobra. So they killed the snake, with their clubs, retrieved the golden chain, and went back to the pond. The crow and his wife lived happily ever after. A tale from the Panchatantra, 4th century, retold The Craft of Power, R.G.H. Sue, 1979. It sounds similar to the story of Huckleberry Finn, right? Like, it sounds like basically, this is our problem. How are we gonna get this problem to get fixed? Okay, we're gonna need this. It sounds very orchestrated. Having someone else do the work and someone basically that's the whole chapter. Okay, so now let's go ahead and get into the observance of the law too. In the late 1920s, civil war broke out in China as the Nationalist and Communist Party battled for the control of the country. In 1927, Chiang Kai-shek, the nationalist leader, vowed to kill every last communist. And over the next few years, he nearly accomplished his task. OMG. Punishing his enemies hard until 1934 to 1935. He forced them into the Long March, a 6,000-mile retreat from the southeast to remote northwest through harsh terrain in which most of their ranks were decimated. In late 1936, Chiang planned one last offensive to wipe them out, but he was caught in a mutiny. His own soldiers captured him and turned him over to the communists. Now he could only expect the worst. Meanwhile, however, the Japanese began the invasion of China, and much to Chiang's surprise, instead of killing him, the communist leader, Mao Zedong, proposed a deal. The communists would let him go and would recognize him as the commander of their forces as well as his, if he would agree to fight alongside them against the common enemy. Chiang had expected torture and execution. Now he could not believe his luck. I know, right? It'd be by your own people, but it's like these deals that get presented. It's like, what are they gonna do? What are they gonna do? Okay. Where was I at? Chiang had okay. How soft these Reds had become. Without having a fight to regard action against communists, he knew he could beat the Japanese, and then a few years down the line, he would turn around and destroy the Reds with ease. He had nothing to lose and everything to gain by agreeing to their terms. The communists proceeded to fight the Japanese in their usual fashion with the hit and run guerrilla tactics, while the nationalists fought a more conventional war. Together, after several years, they succeeded in evicting the Japanese. Now, however, Chiang finally understood what Mao had really planned. His own army had met the brunt of the Japanese artillery, was greatly weakened, and would take a few years to recover. The communists, meanwhile, had not only avoided any direct hits from the Japanese, they had used this time to recoup their strength and spread out and gain pockets of influence all over China. And as soon as the war against the Japanese ended, the Civil War started again. But this time the communists enveloped the weakened nationalists and slowly beat them into submission. The Japanese had served as Mao's cat paw, inadvertently plowing the fields for the communists and making possible their victory over Chiang Kai-shek. So it was kind of like more like, okay, you and I, we already don't like each other, but let's collaborate together, even though, so basically, you're in trouble. I'm going to help you, but you have to help me fight against them. And then they're going to be like the front line while I'm like sitting back. And then once you defeat them, I'm going to go ahead and beat up you. That's kind of how it sounds, right? Okay. So let's go ahead and get into the interpretation of what I just read. Most leaders who had taken as powerful an enemy as Chiang Kai-shek prisoner would have made sure to kill him, but in doing so, they would have lost their chance, Mao exploited. Without the experienced Chiang as leader of the nationalists, the fight to drive the Japanese out might have lasted longer, with devastating results. Mao was far too clever to let anger spoil the chance to kill two birds with one stone. In essence, Mao used two cat paws to help him attain a total victory. First, he cleverly baited Xiang into taking charge of the war against the Japanese. Mao knew that the nationalists led by Xiang would do most of the hard fighting and would succeed in pushing the Japanese out of China if they did not want to concern themselves with fighting the communists at the same time. The nationalists then were the first cat paws used to evict the Japanese. But Mao also knew that in the process of leading the war against the invaders, the Japanese artillery and air support would decimate the conventional forces of the nationalists, doing damage and it could take the communists decades to inflict. Why waste time and the lives if the Japanese could do the job so quickly? It was wise policy of using one cat's paw after another that allowed the communists to prevail. There are two uses of the cat paws: to save appearances, as Cleopatra did, and to save energy and effort. The latter case in particular demands that you plan several moves in advance. Realizing a temporary move backwards, letting Xiang go. Now, this is what I call real mental warfare. Right, right. It is so psychological. It is so psychological. Like, this is really like being 10 steps ahead, being strategic, planning, and like, yeah. Letting Xiang go, say, can lead a giant leap forward. If you are temporarily weakened and need time to recover, it will often serve you well to use those around you as a screen to hide your intentions and a cat paw to let the work your work do for you. Now that's a little tidbit to one of the laws that I read in one of the past chapters. I don't remember which one, but if you go through the lives, you will see like use a smoke screen. So that's kind of like the same thing that Mao had done in this story. He was using a smoke screen. Look for a powerful third party who shares an enemy with you, and if for different reasons, then take advantage of their superior power to deal blows, which would have cost you much more energy since you are weaker. You can even gently guide them into the hostilities. Always search out the overly aggressive as potential cat paws. They are often more willing to get into a fight, and you can choose just the right fight for your purpose. That is interesting. Sad part is this is what governments have been doing for years. Yeah. It's really, really sad, but it's good for us to like know this and to see this and have awareness of what is really going on behind all of these smoke screens that they do. And like, yeah, this is really what happens is like, oh yeah, let's go to war together, let's do this, that, and the third together. And then they'll go and they strip that country of all of its resources and all of the things that made the country rich before that country came. So let's go ahead and read a little bit more of these little red fable stories, poems, whatever they are. Okay, so how to broadcast news. When Omar, son of Al-Khattab, was converted to Islam, he wanted the news of his conversion to reach everyone quickly. He went to see Jamil, son of Ma'mar al-Juma. The latter was renowned for his speed, with which he passed on secrets. If he was told anything in confidence, he let everyone know about it immediately. Omar said to him, I have become a Muslim. Do not say anything. Keep it dark. Do not mention it in front of anyone. Jamil went out of the street and began shouting at the top of his voice, do you believe that Omar, son of Al-Khattab, has not become a Muslim? Well, do not believe that. I am telling you that he has. The news of Omar's conversion to Islam was spread everywhere, and that was just what he intended. The Subtle Rose, the Book of Arabic Wisdom and Guile, 13th century. So I guess that's more of a case like know exactly who the person that you are dealing with is and act accordingly. A fool and a wise man. A wise man, walking alone, was being bothered by a fool throwing stones at his head. Turning to face him, he said, "My dear chap, well thrown. Please accept these few francs. You've worked hard enough to get more than mere thanks. Every effort deserves its reward. But see that man over there, he can't afford more than I can. Present him with some of your stones, they'll earn you a good wage." Excuse me. Lured by the bait, the stupid man ran off to repeat the outrage on the other worthy citizen. This time he wasn't paid in money for his stones. Up rushed serving men and seized him and thrashed him and broke all his bones. In the courts of the king there are pests like this, devoid of sense. They'll make their master laugh at your expense. To silence their cackles, should you hand out rough punishment? Maybe you're not strong enough. Better persuade them to attack somebody else who can more than pay them back. Selected Fables, Jean de La Fontaine, 1621 to 1695. Okay, and then let's read this one. The Indian Bird. A merchant kept a bird in a cage. He was going to India, the land from which the bird came, and asked it whether he could bring anything back for it. The bird asked for its freedom, but was refused. So he asked the merchant to visit a jungle in India and announce his captivity to the free birds who were there. The merchant did so, and no sooner had he spoken than a wild bird, just like his own, fell senseless out of a tree on the ground. The merchant thought that this must be a relative of his own bird, and felt sad that he should have caused this death. When he got home, the bird asked him whether he had brought good news from India. "No," said the merchant. "I fear that my news is bad. One of your relations collapsed and fell at my feet when I mentioned your captivity." As soon as these words were spoken, the merchant's bird collapsed and fell to the bottom of the cage. The news of his kinsman's death had killed him too, thought the merchant. Sorrowfully he picked up the bird and put it on the window sill. At once the bird revived and flew to a nearby tree. "Now you know," the bird said, "that was what you thought was disaster was in fact good news for me, and how the message, the suggestion of how to behave in order to free myself, was transmitted to me through you, my captor." And he flew away, free at last. Tales of the Dervishes, Idris Shah, 1967. I kind of like that one. Okay, guys, my phone is at 20%, so let me go ahead and hurry this up. Woo! Okay, we're almost done, guys. We are almost done. Observance of the Law 3. Kuruma Daisen was an adept of Shinoya, hot water for tea, the Japanese tea ceremony, and a student of the teachings of the great tea master Senno Riku. Around 1620, Daisen learned that a friend of his, Hoshino Somen, had borrowed a large sum of money, 30 ryo, to help a relative who had fallen into debt. But although Somen had managed to bail out his relative, he had simply displaced the burden onto himself. Daisen knew Somen too well. He neither cared nor understood much about money. He could easily get into trouble through slowness in repaying the loan, which had been made the wealthy merchant called Kawachiya Sineman. Yet if Daisen offered to help Somen pay back the loan, he would refuse out of pride and might even be offended. One day Daisen visited his friends, and after touring the garden and looking at Somen's prized peonies, they retired to his reception room. Here Daisen saw a painting by the master Kano Tenyu. "Ah," Daisen exclaimed, "a splendid piece of painting. I don't know when I have seen anything I like better." After several more votes of praise, Somen had no choice. "Well," he said, "since you like it so much, I hope you will do me a favor of accepting it." At first Daisen refused, but when Somen insisted, he gave in. The next day, Somen in turn received the package from Daisen. Inside of it was a beautiful, delicate vase, which Dyson, in the accompanying note, asked his friend to accept a token of his appreciation for the painting that Soman had so graciously given him the day before. He explained that the vase had been made by Senno-Riku himself and bore the inscription from Emperor Hideyoshi. Yes, for those who think they're funny. Right? Play a fool. I forgot that. I don't even know. I don't even know what the term is. I'm not even gonna try to come up with it. If Soman did not care for the vase, Dyson suggested he might make a gift to his adherent of Shayano, perhaps the merchant Kawachi Seinman, who had often expressed a desire to possess it. I hear, Dyson continued, he has a fine piece of fancy paper, the 300 ryu IOU, which you would much like. It is possible you might arrange an exchange. Realizing what his gracious friend was up to, Soman took the vase to his wealthy lender. However did you get this? Exclaimed Steinman. When Soman showed him the vase, I have often heard of it, but this is the first time I have ever seen it. It is such a treasure. It has never allowed outside the gate. He instantly offered to exchange the debt note for the flower vase, and to give Soman 300 ryu more on top of it. But Soman, who did not care for money, only wanted the debt note back, and Cinnamon gladly gave it to him. Then Soman immediately hurried to Dyson's house to thank him for his clever support. Ma'am, thank you for the intellectual and stimulating convo. I gotta get back to work. You have a blessed. Thank you so much, Mr. Russ. It was such a pleasure for you to be a part of my live. And the next time I am on live, subscribe or turn on the notification so you can get educated more by Mr. Robert Greene himself. I am just a medium. I am literally just the medium. Oh, thank you so much, Mr. Russ. You are amazing. Have a good day at work. Don't work too hard, okay? Don't work too hard. Okay. Now, let's go ahead and get into the interpretation of the law of what I just read to you guys, okay? Kuriyama Daisen understood that granting of a favor is never simple. If it is done with a fuss and obviousness, its receiver feels burdened by an obligation. This may give the door a certain power, but it is a power that will eventually self-destruct, for it will stir up resentment and resistance. A favor done indirectly and elegantly has 10 times more power. Daisen knew an approach would only have offended Soiman. By letting his friend give him the painting, however, he made Soiman feel that he too had pleased his friend with the gift. In the end, all three parties emerged from the encounter feeling fulfilled in their own way. In essence, Daisen made himself the cat's paw, the tool to take the chestnuts out of the fire. He must have felt some pain in losing the vase, but he gained not only the painting, but more important, the power of the courtier. The courtier used his gloved hand to soften any blows against him, disguise his scars, and to make the act of rescue more elegant and clean. By helping others, the courtier eventually helps himself. Dyson's example provides the paradigm for every favor done between friends and peers. Never impose your favors. Search out ways to make yourself the cat's paws, indirectly extricating your friends from distress without imposing yourself or making them feel obligated to you. One should not be too straightforward. Go and see the forest. The straight trees are cut down and the crooked ones are left standing. By Katlia, the Indian philosopher, the 3rd century BC. Now, these are the keys to power. As a leader, you may imagine that constant diligence and the appearance of working harder. Let me put this. Oh my God. Constant diligence and the appearance of working harder than anyone else signify power. Although the Actually, though, they have an opposite effect. They imply weakness. Why are you working so hard? Perhaps you are incompetent and have to put in extra effort just to keep up. Perhaps you are one of those people who does not know how to delegate and has to meddle in everything. The truly powerful, on the other hand, seem never to be in a hurry or overburdened, while others work their fingers to the bone. They take their leisure. They know how to find the right people to put in effort while they save their energy and keep their hands out of fire. Similarly, you may believe that by taking on the dirty work yourself, involving yourself directly in unpleasant actions, you impose your power and instill fear. In fact, you make yourself look ugly and abusive of your high position. Truly powerful people keep their hands clean. Only things surround them, and only announcements they make are of glorious achievements. You will often find it necessary, of course, to expand energy or to effect an evil but necessary action. But you must never appear to be this action's agent. Find a cat's paw. Develop the art of finding, using, and in time getting rid of these people when their cat's paw role has been fulfilled. On the eve of an important river battle, the great 3rd century Chinese strategist Chuko Liang found himself falsely accused of secretly working for the other side. As proof of his loyalty, his commander ordered him to produce 100,000 arrows for the army within 3 days or to be put to death. Instead of trying to manufacture the arrows, an impossible task, Lian took a dozen boats and bundles of straws lashed to their sides, and the late afternoon, when the mist had blanketed the river, he floated the boats towards the enemy camp. Fearing a trap from the wily Shuko Liang, the enemy did not attack the barely visible boats with boats of their own, but showered them with arrows from the bank. As Liang's boats inched closer, they redoubled with rains of arrows which stuck in the thick straw. After several hours, the men hiding on the board sailed the vessels quickly downstream, where Chuko Liang met them, collected his 100,000 arrows. Chuko Liang would never do work that others could do for him. He was always thinking up tricks like this one. The key to planning such a strategy is the ability to think far ahead, to imagine ways in which other people can be baited into doing the job for you. An essential element in making the strategy work is to disguise your goal, shrouding it in a mystery, like the strange enemy boats appearing will react in ways that often work against them in the long run. In fact, they will become your cat's paw. If you disguise your intentions, it is much easier to guide them into moves that accomplish exactly what you want done, but prefer not to do yourself. This may require planning several moves in advance, like a billiard ball that bounces off the sides a few times before heading into the right pocket. The earlier 20th century American con artist Yellow Kid Wheel knew that no matter how skillfully he homed in on the perfect wealthy sucker, if he, a stranger, approached this man directly, the sucker might become suspicious. So Wheel would find someone the sucker already knew to serve as a cat's paw, someone lower on the totem pole who was himself an unlikely target would therefore be less suspicious. Will would interest the man in a scheme promising incredible wealth. Convinced the scheme was for real, and the cat's paw would often suggest, without prompting, that his boss or wealthy friend should get involved. Having more cash to invest, this man would increase the size of the pot, making bigger bucks for all concerned. The cat's paw would then involve this wealthy sucker, who was his trusty subordinate, had roped him in. Well, who had been Will's target all along, but who would not suspect a trap, since it was truly his trusty subordinate who had roped him in. Devices like this are often the best way to approach a person of power. Use an associate or subordinate to hook up with your primary target. The cat's paw establishes your credibility and shields you from the unsavory appearance of being too pushy in your courtship. The easiest and most effective way to use a cat's paw is often to plant information with him that he will spread to your primary target. False or planted information is a powerful tool, especially if you're spread by dupe whom no one suspects. You will find it very easy to play innocent and disguise yourself as a source. The strategic therapist, Dr. Milton H. Erickson, would often encounter among his patients a married couple in which the wife wanted the therapy, but the husband absolutely refused it. Rather than wasting energy trying to deal with the man directly, Dr. Erickson would see the wife alone, and as she talked, he would interject interpretations of the husband's behavior that she would that he knew would rile the husband up if he heard them. Sure enough, the wife would tell her husband what the doctor said, and after a few weeks, the husband would be so furious that he would insist on joining the wife in the session so he could set the doctor straight. Finally, you may well find cases in which deliberately offering yourself as the cat's paw will ultimately gain you great power. This is the ruse of the perfect courtier. Its symbol is Sir Walter Raleigh, who once placed his own cloak on the muddy ground so that Queen Elizabeth would not sully her shoes. As the instrument that protects a master or peer from the unpleasantness or danger, you gain immense respect, which sooner or later will pay dividends. And remember, if you can make your assistant subtle and gracious rather than boastful and burdensome, your recompense will be that much more satisfying and powerful. Now, let's get into this little red story. David and Bathsheba. At the turn of the year, when the kings take the field, David sent Joab out with the other officers and all the Israelite forces, and they ravaged Ammon and laid siege to Rabbah. While David remained in Jerusalem, one evening David got up from his couch, and as he walked about on the roof of the palace, he saw from there a woman bathing, and she was very beautiful. He sent to inquire who she was, and the answer came, "It must be Bathsheba, daughter of Eliam and wife of Uriah the Hittite." David wrote a letter to Joab and sent Uriah with it. He wrote in the letter, "Put Uriah opposite in the enemy where the fighting is fiercest, and then fall back and leave him to meet his death." Joab stationed Uriah at a point where he knew they would put up a stout fight. The men of the city sallied out and engaged Joab, and some of David's guards fell. Uriah the Hittite was also killed. Joab sent David and dispatched with the news of the battle. When Uriah's wife heard that her husband was dead, she mourned for him. And when the period of mourning was over, David sent for her and brought her into his house. She became his wife and bore him a son. Old Testament, 2 Samuel 11:12. Wow, guys, that is wild. This man really set this lady's husband up and then stole his wife. That's so crazy. Now imagine this. Now, if you are driving, handling heavy machinery, do not close your eyes. If not, close your eyes. Okay. The cat's paw. It has long claws to grab things. It is soft and padded. Take hold of a cat and use its paw to pluck things out of a fire. To claw your enemy, to play with the mouse before devouring it. Sometimes you hurt the cat, but often it doesn't feel a thing. Authority. Do everything pleasant yourself, everything unpleasant through third parties. By adopting the first course, you win favor. By taking the second, you deflect ill will. Important affairs often require rewards and punishment. Let only good come from you and the evil from others. Baltasar Gracian, 1601 to 1658. Now, this is reversal to the law. If this law is not working, this is what you should do, guys. The cat's paw and scapegoat must be used with extreme caution and delicacy. They are like screens that hide your own involvement in dirty work from the public. If at any moment the screen is lifted and you are seen as the manipulator, the puppet master, the whole dynamic turns around. Your hand will be seen everywhere, and you will be blamed for misfortunes you may have had nothing to do with. Okay? Once the truth is revealed, the events will snowball beyond your control. In 1572, Queen Catherine de Medicis of France conspired to do away with Gaspard de Coligny, an admiral in the French Navy and leading member of the Huguenot French Protestant community. Coligny was close to Catherine's son Charles IX, and she feared his growing influence on the young king. So she arranged for the member of the Guise family, one of the most powerful royal clans in France, to assassinate him. Secretly, however, Catherine had another plan. She wanted Huguenots to blame the Guises for killing one of the leaders and to take revenge. With one blow, she would erase it or injure two threatening rivals, Coligny and the Guise family. Yet both plans went awry. Awry? The assassin missed his target, only wounding Coligny. Knowing Catherine as his enemy, he strongly suspected it was she who had set up the attack on him, and he told the king so. Eventually, the failed assassination and arguments that ensued from it set off chain events that led to a bloody civil war between the Catholics and the Protestants, culminating in the horrifying massacre of St. Bartholomew's Eve, in which thousands of Protestants were killed. If you have to use a cat's paw or a scapegoat in an action of a great consequence, be very careful. Too much can go wrong. It is often wiser to use such dupes in a more innocent endeavors, where mistakes or miscalculations will cause no serious harm. Finally, there are moments when it is advantageous to not disguise your involvement or responsibility, but rather to take the blame yourself for some mistake. If you have the power and are secure in it, you should sometimes play the penitent. With a sorrowful look, you ask for forgiveness from those weaker than you. It is a ploy of the king who makes a show of his own sacrifices for the good of the people. Similarly, upon occasion, you may want to appear as the agent of punishment in order to instill fear and trembling in your subordinates. Instead, the cat's paw, you show your own mighty hand as a threatening gesture. Play such a card sparingly. If you play it too often, fear will turn into resentment and hatred. Before you know it, such emotions will spark a vigorous opposition that will someday bring you down. Get in the habit of using a cat's paw. It is far safer. Guys, that chapter was so long. I'm not even going to say my thoughts about it. Long story short, I think sometimes it's like if you want to get involved in something but you really don't want to get involved, sometimes it's best to plant seeds of thought and let other people do the bidding for you. That's all I'm going to say. Have a good night, guys. Thank you so much for watching. Please subscribe if you vibe. More hot girl reads will be coming shortly. And if you guys have any book suggestions on what you want me to read next, because I do have a book in mind, but I don't know if you guys want to hear it. So let me know if you guys want another book outside of the 48 Laws of Power for me to read to you guys. Have a good day, night, evening, morning, and hablamos más tarde.